As we continue our discussion of physical activity and development in preschoolers, let's look at some threats to preschool physical skills. If you were to talk with your grandparents or great grandparents, and maybe possibly even for some of you still, you would have said that when you were growing up, as you were children, that you mostly played outside and you played a wide variety of games. If you lived in a more rural country area, you might have played with animals, you might have climbed trees, you would have done a variety of things that gave you the capacity to exercise large muscle groups and helped you with the development of physical skills. But increasingly, for a couple of reasons, we don't see this as much. Instead, parents tend to keep children inside, and to give them activities, they give them access to online or internet access, to tablets, games on television, things of that sort. And the two reasons are, number one, it doesn't require as much attention on the part of the parent. And number two, parents may be fearful, understandably so, to let their children go out and play unattended outside for fear that something's going to happen to the child. And so, not wanting to give their child a boring childhood, they just have purchased high-tech educational toys that the child can use at home. I'm not saying those are bad ideas, and neither does your textbook, but those alone probably are not going to help a child develop physically the way they need to. The other is the lack of food. We've talked about stunting before, which is the indication of not enough food, where children end up scoring in the fifth percentile in terms of height. So, out of they're the height of if you take children and you put them in a row from the tallest to the shortest, the stunted children will be the bottom 5 out of the 100. And malnutrition or undernutrition is going to lead to the impairment of fine and gross motor skills. And because children are not being fed the kind of food that gives them the energy that they need, they're not being fed complex carbohydrates, they're not being fed protein, they end up feeling tired and fatigued. And that fatigue is going to limit their ability to become involved in more vigorous physical activities. Now we're going to talk a little bit about cognitive development, and we're going to continue with our discussion of Piaget. We've already talked about Piaget's sensory motor stage. We're going to talk mostly in this chapter about pre-operational thinking, which is children from the ages of 3 to 7. There's a number of concepts in this area that we're going to go over multiple times because I want you to really understand them well. One of the things we know is that these children they're sort of locked into the way things look. And we'll have a discussion later on about how that plays itself out in what is, at this particular time, when this video was being made, an upcoming holiday of Halloween. So they're locked into immediate appearances, how things look, and they're unable to step back and think about things conceptually. The next stage will be concrete operational thinking that we'll talk about next. So in Piaget's pre-operational period, which is the second stage, ages 2 through 7, these are some characteristics. They tend to have the quality of animism. Animism means the child's belief that things that we know of as being inanimate they think they're actually alive. So it might be something that's quite understandable, like your doll baby. Your doll baby is alive, or your some human-like looking toy or stuffed animal is alive, but it can be something that sometimes surprises parents. So I remember talking to a 4-year-old one time who was telling me they were very sad, and I said, "Why are you sad?" And she said to me, "I'm sad because my mommy put my toothbrush in the trash can." And her mother was there, and she said, "Well, it's an older toothbrush. We have a new toothbrush for them. And I said to the little girl, I said, why does that make you sad? And she said, because I think the toothbrush feels sad being in the trash can. And that toothbrush was a good friend to me. It helped me keep my teeth clean. And from that vantage point, that makes some sense. The toothbrush was a part of that child's life. And of course, if you look at a lot of the books and the stories that children read at that age, 2 through 7, they involve things. They involve animism. So Frosty the Snowman is a classic example of animism. It's a snowman. It's not a human being, but we attribute it with human emotions and feelings, and we feel sad when he melts and goes away. Another characteristic of this stage is deferred imitation. So children will watch adults do things, and then later they will act it out. Now this is sometimes for the good, and sometimes it's not for the good. So little girls may watch mommy as she's making up her face and putting on her lipstick and maybe putting on, hopefully not eyeliner, because that could be really a problem for children who are not terribly coordinated at this point. But putting on maybe rouge or other makeup like that. And so when mommy's not there, it's not at all uncommon for little girls to find themselves in mommy's room or in the bathroom where the makeup is, and they're putting that on because they've seen mommy do it, and they know how she does it. Watching daddy do things with the car, and then little boys can act out those same kinds of things as they're playing with their toy cars. So you can see as we're talking about this that this would be an important skill for children because they're learning how to do things that they're eventually going to want to do and may not necessarily be taught to do. And then the third is symbolic play. So this is the time when children begin to do things like play house and play family and maybe play battle and have wars with each other. There are some people who would say that if you give a boy any object, he will likely turn that object into a gun. If it's a stick, if it's a pair of pliers, anything that can be made into a gun. If he wants to play war, he can make that into a gun. If you go to a preschool program, they typically have a miniature kitchen in there, and children they'll play house, and they'll assign parts. You're the mommy, you're the daddy, you're the baby, and people will make decisions. Kids will make decisions. Oh, I don't want to be the baby this time. I was the baby last time. I want to be the mommy, or I want to be the daddy. And it gives them the option to begin to experiment with the kinds of social roles that will later on be important to them in their life. Now, some elements of pre-operational thinking. Pre-operational children, this is number 2 through 7, have difficulty making distinction between mental and physical events. So things that they think about and things that actually are real. They may believe that dreams are real. They have a dream, they may believe that it's real. They may see things on television that cartoons or Christmas time, Frosty the Snowman. And they may watch the whole story of Frosty the Snowman and be sad at the end because he has gone away. And that makes them feel sad. They may not understand that really is not, according to Piaget, that is not a real object. That's not real. They also can tend to focus on only one dimension of a problem at a time. We're going to talk about that in a minute when I can show you some graphics that will make that make more sense. And the other two are also things I'm going to just tell you what the meanings of them are now. I'm going to show you some pictures that will help them make more sense. They also have not mastered the law of conservation. The law of conservation says that properties of substances such as volume, mass, and number remain the same even if you change their shape or arrangement. And children, when they reach the concrete operation stage, which is 7 and on, will have mastered all of those. Now, I'll give you an example of something that might make sense for you right now, as an example of conservation. If you put an ice cube in a glass, and then you put 2 ice cubes in a glass, and the ice cubes are the same size because they came from the same, either you have an ice cube maker in your refrigerator or you have an ice cube tray, whatever you might have, but they're the same size ice cube. And you take one glass and you put it back in the freezer, which keeps the ice cube frozen. And you take the other glass with the ice cube in it and you put it on the table. So what's eventually going to happen to the ice cube that's on the table? Yeah, it's going to melt. And so before that happens, you have the 2 ice cubes in the glass, and you say to the child, the 2 through 7-year-old child, are these the same, or are they different? And children will say they're the same. They're the same. Once one of the ice cube melts, if you say to them, is this the same or are they different? They will say they're different. And you'll say, which is more? And they'll either say the frozen ice cube is more, or they'll say the melted water is more. And if you might say to them, why is it more? And they might say with the ice cube, because it's taller in the glass. Or for the ice cube that's melted, they might say because the water is spread all over the entire part of the glass. Now, if I ask you that question, you would say they're the same. Just one of the ice cubes melted. They were the same size to begin with, but one of them melted. And now they look different, but if you look in terms of the amount of water that makes up each of these ice cubes, they're probably, because they're the standard size of ice cube and an ice cube maker, they're the same size. So children who are 2 through 7, they don't understand that. They're going to say that one of those things is bigger than the other. And the last part is what we just talked about. The pre-operational child has not mastered reversibility. So if I said to you, if I took out the ice cube that was in the freezer, and then I showed you the glass with the ice cube that had melted, and I said to you, which of these is more? You, in your mind, would go back and remember how the ice cubes looked when they were both frozen. And you would say to yourself, well, they're the same size. It's just one of them has melted. It's because you can reverse your thinking. You can go back several tracks on your internal DVD to say nothing has really changed. So we're going to talk about these a little bit more. Let me skip to this. And so here's an example. We can look at conservation, how the volume or the mass of an object remains the same even though we might change its shape. So we can do type conservation of number. So we have 2 equal rows of pennies. We have 6 pennies, and so we ask the child, are these 2 rows the same? And the child will say yes. And then if you spread out, increase the spacing of the pennies in one line, and then you ask the question, now is the amount, are these the same? Is the amount of money the same? They will typically say no. And you say, which is more? And they will say, the longer row has more. So that's what they'll say. Now, there's 2 aspects, and this actually refers to the last statement. This statement here about let's see right here, about centration, or the ability to focus on one dimension of a problem at a time. Sorry. So when you're looking at this, there are 2 aspects to this problem. there's the number of coins, and there's the space between the coins. So if I said to you, are these the same? If you focused on the number of coins, you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You would say they're the same. But if you focused on the space between the coins, you would say, oh no, this is more. And I would say, why? And you would say, because there's more space between them. So children can only focus on one aspect of a problem at a time. And you'll have to ask them if you say to them, and I would encourage any of you've got children who are like 3, 4, 5, I would encourage you to try some of these conservation tasks to see. It's fascinating to watch a child do this and to listen to what they have to say about this. If you don't have this, if you want to go online, go to YouTube and look up conservation task videos. You can watch some of those and you might find those to be interesting as well. There are two aspects of this problem, the number of coins and the space between the coins. The child, if you ask which is more, they'll tell you which one's more. If you say why, then they'll say because this has greater space in them, or because they both have the same number. Now, you can do type of conservation of mass, of number, conservation of mass. You can take 2 equal balls of clay. We're looking to see, do they understand that even though something changes about an object, that the amount has probably not changed. So you ask these children, do these 2 balls have the same amount of clay? And the kids will say yes. And then you take one of the balls and you make it into a pancake shape. And then you say to them, now, are they the same? Or are they different? They'll say they're different. And you'll say, which one is more? Now, usually the children will say the one that looks like a pancake is more. Now, is this one more? No, they're the same. They started like this. You just crushed one. But sometimes you'll say to a child, which one is more? You show them these. And they'll say, this is more. And you say, why? And they'll say, because it's taller. Or they may say, this one's more, and you would say, why? And they would say, because it's flatter. So you can see they can only focus on one aspect of the problem. You would say, yes, this is taller, and yes, this is flatter, but they're the same. They come from the same piece to begin with. You can decenter. You can focus on more than one aspect of a problem at a time. The conservation of volume or liquid. So 2 glasses of the same size with liquid, and you ask the child, do these glasses have the same amount of liquid? Children will say, or juice, children will say yes. And then you take one of the glasses in full view of the child, and you pour that liquid into a taller, narrower glass. And then you say to the child, do these glasses have the same amount of juice? The children will say no. And you will say, which one has more? And they may say this shorter glass has more. They may say the taller glass has more. And then your next question is, why does it have more? Remember, we're talking about can you or can they focus on more than one aspect of the problem at a time? They will say, this one has more. Why? Because it's wider. Or they will say, this one is more because it's taller. Now, if I ask you that question, you would say, yes, this one is wider. And yes, this one is taller. But they came from the same to begin with. It's the same amount of liquid to begin with. So the fact that there are 2 aspects of the problem is not going to confuse you as much as it's going to confuse a pre-operational child. And the last, the conservation of matter. 2 identical cubes of sugar. Do these cubes have the same amount of sugar? Children will say yes. And then you take one of the cubes and you put it in a glass of water, and the cube is going to, of course, is going to dissolve. And then if you ask the child, now, is there the same amount of sugar in both of these? And children will say, usually will say, no. And if you say why, and you ask which one has more, they'll say this one. And they'll say because you made one piece of sugar disappear. You would say, well, yes, it's just one piece of sugar was dissolved in this water. They're the same amount. So the ability to realize that even though matter and volume and number can change, can shift, they're still the same amount is one of the hallmarks of conservation. And also to realize that there are two aspects to each problem.